Happy Friday, guys. It's Brent with Lykins Motorsports. Getting some work done here in the shop, waiting on the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight. All I can say on that is I hope it's not rigged. So I hope it's a legitimate fight. There's no script or anything like that. So I guess time will tell, but I'm sure that everybody's making a whole lot of money off of it. So that'll come into play. For this week's video, or one of the videos that we'll probably get done, we're going to be talking about how to choose valve springs based off of the parts that you have and the application and that sort of thing. A lot of the times there are cylinder heads that are already set up for a very common install height, and the valves are the perfect length and all that stuff, and it's really easy to pick a spring. Other times it's a pain in the hind end, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a second, because I've got two sets of cylinder heads in here that I'm going to have to buy valve springs, locators, retainers, seals, and locks for. The first set is our small block Ford tunnel port heads. And then I've got a set of ProPort Edelbrock FE heads that a customer dropped by several weeks ago that he wanted us to freshen up. It's on a bracket race car, and he had several hundred passes on it, and he just wanted to go through it and make sure everything was okay, freshen up the valve springs and that sort of thing. So the easiest way to for me to show all this is just jump into it. There's several criteria that we use to choose valve springs. The first of which is the application. So there are different kinds of materials and how they're treated and how they're stress relieved and that sort of thing for different applications. You have a typical street strip type valve spring. Then you have your drag race only valve springs and your endurance valve springs, which are circle track, road race, that sort of thing. So it's best to pick from whatever genre, I guess, of driving or racing that you're going to be doing, and to make sure that you get the right valve spring that will hold up to a continuous specific oil temperature, stress, that sort of thing. The second criteria is your valve spring install height. So that depends on the cylinder head, that depends on the valve length, and all of that needs to be taken into account before you can go looking through the catalogs. The third criteria is your camshaft. You need a specific spring load. You need a specific coil bind clearance so that you can deal with the amount of lift that you have. And it's best to get those numbers from whoever grounds your cam. On this particular couple sets of heads, so we got our small block Ford tunnel port heads. It's a billet core solid flat tappet, which runs a whole lot more spring load than what you would normally run on a solid flat tappet. Normal solid flat tappet spring loads 130, 140 pounds on the seat, 350 open, something like that. Then you get into your nitrided cams with the EDM lifters. We use tool steel EDM lifters that you can get from Trend or Crowler or somebody like that. You can generally run 150, 160 seat, 400, 425 open with those. On this particular cam, it is a tool steel lifter, but it's DLC coated, so diamond like carbon. Very, very hard. The camshaft is hard as well because it's billet steel. So between those two scenarios, you can run a lot more spring load. On this particular cam, we can run anywhere between 200 and 225 pounds on the seat and 450 to 500 over the nose. And that will, what will go into that is how light our valves are, how light we can make our valve spring, retainers, that sort of thing. So we're going to be picking springs. I'm going to show you how to thumb through all the various catalogs. On my street builds, I'll run a comp cams or a pack or a Manley valve spring. On my race stuff, Manley, PSI, pack, that sort of thing. So sometimes it's not black and white on which spring to go for. You got to do some math and figure out, based off of the spring rate, the constant, what it'll be at a specific lift number that you have. And you need to calculate, how far you'll be from coil bind clearance, that sort of thing. A lot of these springs, performance springs, they want to set up close to coil bind. So, anywhere from 50 to 100 thousandths from coil bind. And generally 50 to 60 thousandths is a good spot to be in. So let's take a look at these tunnel port heads, and we'll get some numbers as we go. All right, so here are our small block 4 tunnel port heads. You can see they got the funky rocker arm mounting scenario, and obviously the tunnel ports with the pushrod tubes. These needed fully custom bronze valve guides, so I had CHE to make those. I had them make 16 and then a handful of extra ones just in case we boogered some up. But the valves are, let me see if I can remember this, they're 2 150, 1 600, and the exhaust valve is a Ferrea. The intake valve is a it's escaping my head now. Victory, sorry. These are 7mm stems. They've got a radius lock, and pretty light. I think 110 grams on the intake and like 70 something on the exhaust. So pretty light valves for what they are. 2 150 head is pretty good size for a small block port. I guess I could have showed them to you. They were sitting right here in front of me. So nice, very nice pieces. Ferrea and Victory, all real high quality parts and brands. So once you get your valves in there, you just need to take an install height measurement just to see where we are. And I'll do that for you here in just a second. Let me get my camera situated, put down, and I'll screw all this together and show you what it looks like. Alright, so we've got a set of locks, retainer, no locator, and our spring mic is sitting at 2 inches and 30 thousandths. But let's take a look at the parts we got. So we've got no locator. These locks are some locks that I had. They're plus 50 thousandths. And then we have a titanium retainer that's about 100 thousandths taller than normal. So we can do some simple math here. So 2030 is what we're measuring. If I run just a standard locator, or I'm sorry, a standard retainer, that's going to knock off 100 thousandths of that. And if I run a standard lock, that's going to knock off 50. So I should have had a calculator here. I know I can't do math on the fly. Hold on a minute. So what is that? Let me just get a calculator. I should have known better. It's like performance anxiety when the camera is rolling. So if I were to do a standard retainer and standard locks, I'd be at 1,880. A spring locator is generally about 60 thousandths thick. So I can start looking for springs around the 1,800 mark. I want to double check my math here just while you're sitting here with me. 030, something doesn't jive right. But it looks like it does. Okay, so I'm going to be looking for a spring somewhere around the 1,800 mark, and I'm going to need something around the 220 pound seat and 450 or so pounds over the nose at 600 lift. Okay, so we'll start taking. We'll start. That was nowhere near English. We'll start to take a look through our spring catalogs and see what we can come up with. Alright, so let's start looking for some valve springs for our tunnel port small block forward heads. Like I said, I like to use PSI or PAC or Manley generally for racing stuff. So we'll start out by going to psisprings.com. Most of these spring manufacturers will have 2 or 3 different series of springs depending on what treatment, surface treatment and heat treatment and that sort of thing that you want. Some of them have, with the higher quality springs, they'll be chamfered on the inside or on the outside. They'll be peened, stress relieved, polished, or something like that. So we'll look at PSI springs, and we'll start with their 1500 series. This is a road race engine, so we want a really good valve spring. We want something that'll last and not give up. They divide their catalog into pushrod and overhead cam applications, so we'll look at the pushrod applications. So we're going to be focusing on seat pressure and open pressure, and also the type of valve spring. On the left hand side of the page there, they show a beehive or a dual. I want to stay away from a beehive spring here, and it's not that I don't trust beehives, but a dual spring gives you just a little bit more added protection. If you were to break a beehive spring, you would pretty much drop your valve. If you broke a dual spring, you may have a little bit more chance of saving the engine if that inner spring or something helps keep everything intact. So we'll look at our dual valve springs, and what we're doing is we're looking at the seat load first. I'm going to start putting these at the top of the screen so it'll be easier for you to follow with me. We can go with either, we can make a 1,800 work or a 1,900, 1,850, somewhere around there. We're looking at the seat load first. We want to be 200 to 220 and somewhere around 450 according to the lobe designer that I used for this cam. So we're a long way from the seat load that we want to be at for some of these. Now this 1514 ML, it's 160 pounds at 1,900, and I'll show you some spring math real quick. The number, if you see at the very top, seat pressure, open pressure, rate pounds per inch. Your rate pounds per inch can be multiplied by different numbers to give you a load. So for instance, if that 1514 ML spring, it's 160 pounds at 1,900. If I wanted to try that spring and install it at 1,800, that's a 100 thousandths drop. Now the spring rate is 436 pounds per inch, so dropping that install height to 1,800 would make the seat load go up by about 44 pounds. So that would be about 204 pounds on the seat. Now what does that do to our open load and our coil bind clearance? So you can look at one thing, you have to look at all of them. If I installed that spring at 1/800 and then added if I installed that spring at 1/800, our open load, because this is a 600 lift cam, would be at 1/200, and that spring coil binds at 1/230. So obviously that does not work. So sometimes they have springs that you can just put your finger on right there. I want that one right there. It'll work at my seat load or my installed height, and my open load. The coil bind clearance works out good. Sometimes, like this small block Ford tunnel port cam, you got to do a little finagling. So I've already went through PSI's catalog. I went through their 1500 series and their 1200 series. And their 1200 series, they have a lot more springs, but we don't want a beehive. We don't want a triple spring. We want a small diameter dual spring. And there's just not a lot of choices to pick from. Like I said, sometimes you can finagle the install height. You can close up the install height, but you really have to watch out for that coil bind clearance, and you have to watch out for the open load. Let's look at Manley's catalog. We're going to skip PSI. We'll look at Manley's catalog. And Next Tech springs are really good springs. This first page is dual springs of drag race. I think it said, yeah, dual drag race valve springs. Again, drag race springs, and you can read the comments. Ideally suited for drag racing applications. There are differences between a drag race spring and a road race spring or a street spring. So we'll look at these oval track and endurance valve springs. Again, we'll look at the install height. Most of these are way up in the 200s, and the install heights are pretty tall. That first one could help us a little bit, but well, let's do some math. It's 150 at 1/900, so we can decrease the install height to increase the seat load. What would happen if we took that spring to 1/800? That would bring our seat load up by about 43 pounds, because the rate is 435 pounds per inch. So that would put us at about 193 or so. I want to be a little bit more than that. So that's really not going to work for us. If we keep turning the pages, those are some street springs. Coyote, Hemi springs. Then we have some Street Master and some professional valve springs that are for oval track and drag racing, it says. And if we look down through here, I've already looked through here and kind of done some math, and there's not really anything that jumps out at me here. Plus, most of them are 1/550 springs, the diameter, and I would really like something lighter. The smaller the diameter of the spring means the spring's going to be lighter, but it also means your retainer is going to be lighter, which is good. So we'll look at, how about we go to Pack Springs page, go to product catalogs. We'll look at the table of contents. Circle track springs start with page 20. So there's some circle track endurance springs. Look at the top here. It features Pacalloy super clean wire. It features in-house heat treating and a multi-peen process to optimize service life. This is a sportsman level racing, so it's meant to be a more budget spring. You can't really do budget with a road race. So let's go to this 1300 spring. If we look over here, look at all the goodies that's associated with this spring. In-house heat treating, multi-peen process, ID and OD chamfer finishing, polishing to improve operating cycles, nanopeen proprietary surface treatment. So that's kind of what we want for an endurance type spring. If we look at the install heights and the open heights, they're pretty high, right? I'm seeing 250, 275, 300 seat in the 800s on the open. But there is this 1371 spring. And look, it's small diameter. It's only 1.374" outside diameter. The seat load appears like it's not going to work for us, but let's do some math. So if we set that spring up at a lower install height, let's say we set it up at 1.850. If I look over to the right side of that yellow column, the spring rate is 436. So if I drop the install height of that spring down by 100 thousandths, it's going to make our seat load go up by about 44 pounds. And that'll give us 194 pounds of seat load. I would like to be up above 200. That's where our lobe designer told us that we needed to be with the weight of our valves and the RPM that we're going to be turning. So what would happen if we, say, installed this at 1.835? Now certainly we can get to that point because as we did with our first exercise with the spring mic, and I showed you how we could get to, say, a 1.800 install height by using different locks and different retainers and spring shims and that sort of thing. So 1.835 is certainly doable. So that would be 115 thousandths down from 1.950, right? 1.950 minus 1.835 is 115 thousandths. If we multiply 115 thousandths by 436, which is our spring rate, we get 50 pounds. So that would put us at 200. And that would also put our open load at about 461, because 436 pounds per inch times 600, which is our valve lift, is 261, and if we add that to our seat load, that's 461. So 200 seat, 461 open, and we could probably sneak it down a little bit lower if we wanted to. We got to start looking at our coil bind dimension though. It coil binds at 1.175. Now, you can take that coil bind dimension and you can kind of backwards solve for where you need to be to have significant clearance or sufficient clearance. If that spring coil binds at 1.175 and say I want 60 thousandths coil bind clearance, that would give us an open of 1.235. If I added our valve lift to that, that would give us 1.835. So I think this is where we're going to stay. So that'll give us the required the required 200 pound seat and about 460 pounds over the nose. So sufficient spring load for our application. Now that is a small diameter spring, which is good. It's available. Let's see if I can get you right about there. So 1371 is the spring we're looking at, and it's available with a titanium retainer and some other different parts. It'll work with our valve locks, so we can use either a mini 8 or a 10-degree valve lock, and there are spring locators that will fit our valve guides. So I think this is going to be the one that we go with. I'm going to order these parts for the tunnel port small block Ford, and we'll see what it comes out at when we get a spring in our spring tester when these parts come in. Alright, so we're going to switch over to our Edelbrock heads. Again, these were brought in by a customer several weeks ago and just wanted them freshened up. Got a small exhaust port on them, and they have the NHRA logo on those, so I think these may be some pro ports. I'm not really for sure, but they've been on a drag race engine, several hundred passes, and everything looks really good, so the combination was working very well. He just wanted some new valve springs and retainers and everything freshened up. So on this one, we've got a plus 100 retainer, got our spring locator in there and standard locks, and we are sitting at 2 inches and 50, about 3 thousandths. So when I measure these heads, again, there's no use in reinventing the wheel. So before the heads were disassembled, I checked out what the spring loads were. They were 240 and 700, and he's got a 720 lift cam, so that'll be a little bit easier for us to try to find some springs, and should be a pretty straightforward process. We'll get him some good springs. We'll look through our catalogs here in a second and see what we can find from PAC or from PSI. Alright, so let's look for a valve spring for our Edelbrock heads now. And I've already went through Manley's catalog and PAC Racing and PSI, and I thought this was going to be a pretty much just a point and shoot type deal with finding the right numbers that we need for install height and open height. I know that this combination has been successful. So this is a Nostalgia Superstock engine, and it's, like I said, it's been going 300 passes or so, and when I took the heads apart, they measured about 240, 250 on the seat, about 700 open, and everything looked good. So I kind of want to stay around that same level of spring loads. I'm not really finding anything in the PAC catalog. All of this is for a lot more lift than what we have. We have about 720 lift, and I don't want to get too far away from coil bind clearance, and I don't want to shim it up to the point where my seat load starts to get squirrely. So PAC didn't have anything for me. I looked through PSI's catalog, nothing that really jumped out. They had some good seat loads with install heights, but the open height was a little light. So I was able to go through this Manley catalog, and this guy right here, this 21441P-16, kind of looks like it's going to fit the bill for us. Alright, so we'll look at this 221441P-16. The P means that it's been polished, which is nice. They put a little bit of a, it's a surface enhancement finish. Yeah, this spring right here that's at the top of your screen, so it fits the open spring load, it fits the amount of open spring pressure or the install height is pretty close to where we need it to be, and they set up at Manley wants to set up at about 85 thousandths coil bind clearance. So the install height, or I'm sorry, the seat load is a little higher than what we were running before, but that's not going to hurt anything. So I'm going to look at this Manley Next Tech spring, and we'll look at their retainer and locator and valve locks as well. He was running a Crowler valve spring. I did look and see if I could find those because they were obviously working so well, but they're not going to be in stock until the end of December. So I'll just go back with these Manleys. Alright guys, hope this has helped you a little bit. I know it's kind of monotonous and just a lot of things to be looking at, a lot of calculations and that sort of thing. Hope it helps you out if you're trying to go out on your own. I've literally spent probably an hour and a half sourcing parts for both pairs of heads that I've got going on right now, and we'll see if it all comes to fruition. This is pretty neat. It's got crane stamped in the intake side of these heads. These things are chunks. All nice parts though. CHE valve guides. Got some really good valves. Here's the push rod tubes that you kind of have to watch out for. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to go to that tool steel solid flat tappet camshaft, just to be able to run as big as a push rod as I can possibly get in there. I should be able to run a 3/8 push rod, and the geometry is going to be the same as it would be from the factory, so I shouldn't have any problems doing that. The bigger the push rod, the better. Nice valve job. Look like a machined combustion chamber on these from the get-go. We were not able to bake and tumble these heads just because of the tubes. Just don't want anything rough on those tubes. You have to replace those tubes. It's a pain in the booty, so you don't want to get into anything like that. But very nice ports. So I was going to check piston and valve clearance, and you know what stopped me? And I didn't even give this a consideration. The head bolt holes are for a factory 302, so they're 7/16. Our Man of War block, our World Products block, has half-inch bolt holes. So guess what has to happen? Holes have to be opened up on the heads. So we'll do that on a mill so that you don't take a chance of hurting anything. And yeah, can't check piston and valve clearance without a way of clamping the head down. Otherwise the valve, when the spring, even a checking spring, when the valve starts to open, it'll want to raise the head up off the deck, so we can't have that. Alright guys, hope this helps you out a little bit, and again, if you have not subscribed, please do that so that you don't miss out on what becomes of our small block Ford tunnel port road race motor build. You don't want to miss out on that, or any of the other cool Ford things that we have coming through the shop. Hope you guys are having a good week. Hope to talk to you soon, and I'll catch you later.